Can you hear me now? Hopefully you can. I'm gonna have to check the mute on this when I see myself go live. Hopefully you can hear us. Happy Imbolc, Merry Imbolc. I'm Greyheart, and this is my co-host Rebekah. Say hi, Rebekah.
Hi everyone. Nice to see you.
All right, so let's see here. We got the we're about 30 seconds delayed from what you see right now. So I'm watching the monitor to see where we come up. Can you hear me now? Okay, so we're live. People can hear us. Good. I always check that because I once did not this show. I don't think it was this show. I once did a live stream. It was 4 hours of me live playing a game with absolutely no sound. Not fun. So, welcome to the show. Tonight's topic is Imbolc. It's Imbolc. It must be spring. The beginning of spring. I had to actually look at the title of the show. Imbolc, the beginning of spring. So the first question is, most people ask me is, well, okay, why do you say it's the beginning of spring? It's still February. It's the beginning of February. Why is it the beginning of spring? The calendar says spring doesn't start until the end of March. Well, yes, the calendar says that. We actually got into this a little bit last month. We'll go into it a little more this month, but basically, the problem is that the calendar that everybody uses, it's called the Gregorian calendar, and that's because it is named for Pope Gregory the 13th, who decided that he wanted to change everything around. Before he came into power and screwed everything up, everybody used the Julian calendar, named for Julius Caesar. And when he came in, he changed everything around. This is his changing things around is why October is not the 8th month, November is not the 9th month, December is not the 10th month. He moved everything around, and so he decided that spring should start when it's actually at the middle. In fact, he did that with all 4 seasons. When you look at the calendar and you start to realize what's going on at that time of year, the end of March is the middle of spring. And the way I look at it, the way I show this is that if Yule, which is the winter solstice, is the high point, the peak of winter, the shortest day. I have to think about that sometimes. The shortest day, the longest night, it must be the middle. And so it can't be the beginning of winter. Same with Litha, midsummer. It's called midsummer because it's the middle of summer, not the beginning of summer. And so if that's the case, then you have to move everything back a little bit. And so instead of Ostara being the beginning of spring, you get Imbolc being the beginning of spring. So, Rebekah, talk to us a little bit about Imbolc and, I don't know, some of the signals and signs, and how do we tell it's Imbolc? Besides the furry little hedgehog, groundhog, whatever it is, coming out of his hole and saying 6 more weeks of winter.
Well, actually, that came from a bear.
Came from a bear?
Yes, it came from a bear.
Okay.
There is a group that used to be known as the Bear Clan, and what they would do is they would parade around in bear skins. And basically, the whole thing behind it is this is about the time of year when bears would come out of hibernation and start looking for things to eat. This was a time of waking up and starting anew for them. So that's where the Bear Clan comes in. It was I want to say antiquity to about Middle Ages, and it was mostly Germans and Scandinavians, but to a lesser extent, there were some Celts that also celebrated the bear as well during this particular time of year.
Well, and it's interesting because you mentioned the Celts. One of the stories I heard from my favorite Celts, the Celtic Reconstructionists, was a story about the Cailleach, and the Cailleach being the Queen of Winter. And the long story short, basically the tale is that on Imbolc, she would go out for the last time to gather firewood for the winter, and if it was a cloudy day, she was cool and comfortable and no problem, she'd go back to her hut and she would burn her wood, and spring and summer would come at their normal time. If, on the other hand, it was a sunny, bright day and in any way warm, she would curse the day and she would go back and she would cast her spells to bring the clouds back, and you would end up with like 6 more weeks of winter.
Mm-hmm.
So
I've heard a similar math.
So how does the bear give us 6 more weeks of winter?
Let's see. I have notes on this. Hang on just a second. Basically, they would come out of their dens and see if the weather was mild. If it was still too cold, they would go back in and go back to sleep. If it was mild enough, they would come out and they would begin foraging again.
So it's not a matter of if it's bright and sunny, they cause more winter.
It had nothing to do with their shadow or anything like that. It had everything to do with whether or not enough snow had melted that it was time for them to come out and reemerge.
Okay, that actually makes sense. I mean, living in Colorado, we're familiar with bears, so yeah, they come out and start foraging and come out of their lethargy, their long sleep from the winter. And I'm going to apologize to everyone right now. Normally Wednesday is my day off. I have all day to prepare for this hour that we're on. I actually have been working. I've been in class this week, and so I have not been able to prepare images, slides, or anything else. So it's going to be a little less interesting than it may be than it has been for the past couple of months. But
it's okay. We'll just be really descriptive.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be really descriptive. I like that. So let's get some more information about this. Yeah.
Well, something else that's a little bit notable about the Festival of the Bear is, and I found this a little bit disturbing. I'm not quite sure why they did it. There's no real background on it, but part of the Festival of the Bear was abduction of young girls and mock rape scenes. So I'm not really sure where that comes into play, but that was part of it. So
let's see here. Hold on. I'm fixing things. Apparently, almost, sort of.
It did make it a large reason why the Catholics wanted to get rid of the holiday altogether.
Because, well, all right. So my understanding is that was less to do with Litha and more to do with Lupercalia.
Well, Lupercalia is a little bit different.
Yes, it is.
This was specifically just about bears. Lupercalia was ancient Rome.
That's correct.
And that was mid-February for Lupercus or Lupercus. However you want to pronounce it. Basically, a god of fertility and shepherds. And this is also the time of year typically when sheep and ewes and goats and such would start either bearing their young or were getting ready to bear their young, and so their teats were full.
Yes.
And so shepherds would often incorporate their milk as part of their rituals because it was seen as a sign of fertility and rebirth and renewal.
Well, in fact, the word Imbolc, one of the possible etymologies of it is that it is originally came from the term for ewe's milk, because ewes are starting to lactate in preparation for lambing.
Yep.
Clay's asking if they didn't they just change it to Candlemas, and that is
there actually is another holiday called Candlemas that was specific to Christians, and that had to do with the purification of the Virgin Mary and the presentation of Jesus Christ at the temple.
Now, I can understand why it would be confusing, because one of the things that Imbolc is known for is the celebration of Brie. And typically, if you're doing the celebration of Brie, the young girl, because it's definitely a maiden, Brie is a maiden, typically the young girl who is playing the part of Bree is wearing a crown of candles, and that symbolizes the return of the light. And in fact, if you look around, you'll notice that even now we're a month, just over a month, maybe a month and a half away from Yule, and the sun is staying up later. Here at this latitude, at Yule, the sun was going down between 4:30 and 5 p.m., and now it's up past 5:30, almost, between 5:30 and 6. So it's gained an hour at night. Just at night, it's also coming up earlier, and so Imbolc, part of what it celebrates is the return of the light, the fact that you notice that the light is coming back, and that you can see the difference in the daytime, and that it is becoming much more prevalent as far as the ability to detect without thinking about it. Most people, part of the problem is that most people don't pay attention. They don't pay attention to the world around them. And I noticed as well, and we'll talk more about this come Ostara and Beltane, but the idea that especially modern people are so busy with their own lives and their work and family and kids and all that stuff, they don't take the time to look around. And so all of a sudden, one day the trees are bare, the next day they're full of leaves, and all of a sudden it's warm. But excuse me, when you look at and pay attention to what's going on around you, you start to recognize and realize that over a relatively short period of time, you can see a large difference in how things look. The sun isn't quite so far south as it was just a month ago, and so it's starting to rise a little bit earlier, and it's starting to set a little bit later, and it's detectable at this point in the year. You absolutely can tell that it's a longer. The days are longer than they were just at Yule.
And you actually said two things that I want to touch on.
Sure.
The first one is candles specifically. One of the rituals that some people participate in is they will either turn on all of their lights in their house, even for just a brief period, or they will put candles in every room of the house representing the light coming back. And the second one that you touched on was the lengthening of the day. This was oftentimes where they would do plow rituals. And what they would do is they would bring out these plows and they would decorate them, and they would pour whiskey over the top of them as a blessing, and they would bring the decorated plow house to house, and there were children who would follow this plow and like be dressed up in costume, and then they would ask for things for the plow to be decorated with, or for the children, food or wine or whatever. And if somebody refused to give a gift to the plow, then they immediately went and plowed up their front yard.
Okay, that's kind of amusing. So it was a threat.
Yes.
Okay.
But
Nice.
it was also part of a ritual and a blessing. Is let's bless the plow, let's give gifts to the plow. That way we have a good harvest, and this year's going to be full and bountiful. And if you don't bless the plow, then we're going to put a curse on your house by basically plowing up your front yard.
Well, all right. So let me ask you this: do you know why they used whiskey?
I don't know why they used whiskey. All I know is it said that they would use whiskey.
Yeah, I can't say for sure. I can guess. I think I can make a pretty good guess at it. Normally, especially back in the day, Ben Franklin was famous for some sort of quote about water is bad, but beer is always good to drink, because you couldn't drink the water. It was dirty. It was polluted, and it had caused all sorts of problems. So in order to drink water, you had to purify it some way, and usually that was with beer. So whiskey, on the other hand, has no ability to quench your thirst. It's alcohol. The reason you drink it is because it gets you drunk. But it also is a much more involved process because basically what you're doing is where beer is brewed, and for that matter, it's a fermentation process. You take that fermented that must, and now you have to put it over fire and distill it. You turn the water to steam, and the alcohol has a lower boiling point than water, so it tends to condense before the water does. The water leaves as steam when the alcohol becomes liquid, and so it's a much more involved process. And so, therefore, by using whiskey, and they've always called it a spirit, and so you are pouring spirits over something that has taken time and effort to create, a great deal of time and effort to create, and you are using it as a libation for the plow. And typically the whiskey comes from a grain of some sort, whether it's corn, at least in this continent, but wheat or barley. Those can all be used to create whiskey. And so you're pouring the wheat or the barley or the oats or whatever grain over the plow, and using sympathetic magic, you are adding it so that the plow will create a fertile ground for more to grow. Clay saying, like it's charming the plow in the Norse tradition. And yes, that's exactly what it is, charming the plow.
Yep.
And we got dead air. Dead air. Oh, anyway. So yeah, while I can't say for sure that's the reason why they used whiskey,
It sounds plausible.
I'm fairly confident that between the effort and time and the magic it takes to create whiskey, and the fact that it's created out of grains, and grains were what they planted. Grains. If you had grains, you could make bread, and if you could make bread, you could feed people.
Mm.
They talk about the cereal grains being the staple. Absolutely, that was what got you through the winter.
Yep.
That's the other
That's
thing.
absolutely true.
That's the other.
And
Go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Well, as I say, that's the other thing is that by this time in the year, we're not to the point where things are flowering. And depending on how far north you are, it's going to be a while before things start to turn green. I know that down in the
Well,
south,
actually, this time of year, you will start seeing things like crocuses.
yes, depending on how far north you are, that's correct. But things like
Yes.
trees, you're not going to see quite so much of. The flowering plants are not necessarily nothing. Things are not yet starting to turn green, but we know that the light is getting longer, and the days are starting to get warmer. And certainly here in Colorado, we've noticed that we've actually had. It was interesting. February 1st was 60 degrees. February 2nd, Imbolc was 30 degrees. And again, this
Yep.
week we're starting to get more warmth again. And I was gonna go somewhere with this, but I don't remember where it was. Something to do with the light and I don't remember what it was. Must not have been important. This isn't rehearsed, folks. It's live.
So, so you mentioned breed earlier. Let's talk a little bit about breed.
Okay.
Um, so a lot of people see her name Brigid and pronounce it Bridget. That's not technically incorrect in English, but it is pronounced breed to most of us. Um, and she was eventually Christianized, and she was considered Saint Breed or Saint Bridget, depending on who you talk to in the Catholic world. Um, but an interesting fact about her is that supposedly she was a triple goddess. That she was the goddess of the spring season, fertility, healing, poetry, and smithcraft, and that she had two sisters, one of which was a healer, and one of which was specifically a smith.
A what?
So that was one of the things I found interesting about Breed, was that she was considered to be a triple goddess.
Her other sister was a what?
A smith.
Oh, Smith.
Like a blacksmith?
Okay,
Yeah.
I heard sniff. I'm going,
No,
Sniff?
Smith.
Smith.
So, like,
Smith.
Uh,
Okay.
so one of the things that that you can do with an altar is, if you can find like a small anvil, that actually is a really good representation of one of the facets of Breed that you can put on your altar. Um, and I just found that really fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, Clay's saying that some of the coldest temperatures are recorded in March, and that's correct. At least in Colorado, March is the number one snowiest month we have. Although this year, I don't think that's going to happen. It's been an interesting winter. Chris and Kelly, the Celtic Reconstructionists, talk about the three signs that the seasons are changing. See, and that's the other thing. Why are we talking about Imbolc? Well, if you are, I'm going to go out on a limb here and make a generalization. And as I say, generalizations are generally wrong. But I'm going to go out on a limb here. If you're following a pagan tradition, chances are that when you are celebrating some sort of holiday, what you're doing is you're celebrating the change of the seasons. And it's important to the ancient pagan paths to know when the seasons change and what's coming, so that you can prepare and be ready for that season as it comes in. There's no point in preparing for planting when spring is already midway through. You had better have your seeds and all of your equipment prepared and ready to go, so that you can plant by the middle of spring, if not before, depending, of course, where you live. But
and that brings into play the plow, because this is typically when they start plowing their fields, getting ready for the first plant.
Right, exactly. And so you have to have all, at this point, if you either have all of your stuff prepared and ready to go, or you are doing it right now so that it's ready when you're ready, when it's time to plant. But my friends Chris and Kelly talk about the three signs of a Sabbat, and they're the calendrical, the astrological, and signs and portents. Now, I can't tell you what those three things are for Imbolc, although I would say signs and portents probably would be the lactating of the ewes, the sheep, would be one of those signs. Calendrical is February 2nd. It's the date on the calendar. Astrologically, I don't know enough about astronomy and astrology to tell you what specifically. I probably could look that up. It would take me a minute or two, but I know that there is you can look into the night sky and see something. You look like you're.
Yeah, what
Go
happens
for
with
it.
astrology is, as we go around the sun, our axis changes, and so the position of the different constellations changes in the night sky. For instance, one night you'll look up and Orion will be right over your head, and then a few months later, at that same time of night, you go outside and he'll be on the horizon. So they knew by the constellations and where they were, as far as astrology is considered.
Right.
Depending on the time of year, what was going to happen next.
Right. What I'm saying is, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that particular sign is. The Orion is
we also have large cosmological events that happen around those times. For instance, it didn't happen on February 2nd. It's actually going to happen, I believe, this Friday. But it's still around the same time of year. We're having a full moon, eclipse, and a comet all happen on the same day.
Well, now the comet isn't something that's going to happen every year, and neither is the eclipse. But
well,
yes.
No, I'm just saying that significant astrological events usually happen
right around
the holidays, and it's pretty neat to watch it.
Yeah, Friday night is the full moon. And so if we're having, you're saying it's a lunar eclipse?
I don't know if it's a lunar or a solar.
Well, it can't be a
I didn't
solar
read through
because
the entire article,
it
but
can't be
I
a
did
solar
see
because the
that it's going to
moon's
be.
full, so it's on the opposite side of the Earth from us. We're between the moon and the sun, so it's got to be a lunar eclipse, which means that next month we'll have a solar eclipse.
Mm,
And I know that we're having, I believe it's this year, we're having a solar eclipse in August because it's going to be a full eclipse up in Wyoming. My brother
oh
and
wow,
I are doing a road trip to go up and watch the full eclipse, the total
nice.
eclipse. But there are always these three signs that you look for to determine specifically when. And of course, some of these things like when the ewes start to lactate and the milk starts to flow, that's not going to happen on a specific day. You usually take two or three of these all in conjunction with each other to determine, hey, this is the time of year. So even if you don't have a calendar and can't say, oh, it's February 2nd, it's Imbolc, you can say, hey, based on the fact that these animals and it's it's going to be livestock uh, are starting to get ready to bear young. So that's one sign, and I see whether it's Orion wherever in the sky or whatever. Like I said, I don't know what that exact astrological phenomenon is, but whatever it is, when it's at a certain point in the sky, you know that we're at this season. That
Well,
also
I mean,
means
with these holidays, I mean, a lot of things can be timed by just the natural world around you. If you never had a calendar, if calendars were gotten rid of all of a sudden, I know for a fact that it's May when hummingbirds show up because they show up in my yard every year in May.
like the
So if
the
you
swallows returning to Capistrano.
exactly,
Yeah,
if you're just watching the natural world around you, you can trace the calendar by the animals, by the
right.
trees, by the way the winds shift.
And that's exactly the sort of thing that I'm talking about. Is that it is these signs that happen that you pick up on, and suddenly you have the you suddenly realize that, oh, okay, yeah, it is it's this season, it's
Hmm.
this time of the year.
Yep.
So what is all right? So we're celebrating the return of the sun. Why?
Well, when we talked about Samhain, first off, it was because it was the turning of the season. It was starting to get darker earlier. It was starting to get colder, and we were welcoming the wintertime and we were stocking up. Now that the sun is returning, things are going to start to thaw out. We're going to be able to start going out and plowing. We're going to start being able to go out and living off of that sunlight that we've been missing throughout the winter. It's going to come back. It's going to warm the earth. It's going to bring us crops. It's going to bring us life back. And that's why the sun is so vitally important in this particular time of year, is because it's bringing back all of those things that we need to live.
Yeah, exactly. And Julian, it's interesting. Julian says it echoes exactly what you said. It'll be a total solar eclipse and a full snow moon. Oh, and watch out for the comet. I was
It
unaware of the comet. I didn't know anything about it. I'm gonna have to go take a look and see what I can find. See how close this. See how close it'll come. How bright it'll be. I've got a telescope I can use to look at these things. But if it's bright enough, you should be able to see it with the naked eye. I don't know whether it will or not. Comets. Think about comets. In Christian times, comets were always foretellers of the comet. Well, if you, I don't have a deck with me right here. Isn't comet part usually seen in the tarot card in the tarot?
it depends on which deck you're using. Some decks have feature comets, some decks don't.
So
I know
so
that in beginner decks, the real basic one,
I know.
there is one card where it shows things like stars shooting through the sky,
Uh-huh.
but um,
I know where you can find out. Hold on a second. Let me take
yeah,
this.
it's not in every single deck.
All right, so I've got my technical difficulties screen up because it's got the tower cord. I figured it was the most appropriate for technical difficulties. I don't see a comet in that, so apparently not in all decks. But one of the things about certainly during Christian times has been that the comets were foretold drastic change, and usually it was interpreted as drastic bad change. Whatever was going on, things were going to get really bad. One exception to that was Constantine, who fighting his enemies prayed to the Christian God, saying, "Send me a sign. If you'll send me a sign, I will believe in you, and I will convert to Christianity." And he saw a comet the next night, and because he saw that as a positive sign, he rallied his troops and they won. But usually comets in most cultures have been bearers of foreboding, and so it will be interesting to see. But that's unusual because, like I said, comets don't happen every year. So to have a comet at this time of the year, it'll be interesting to see what happens and see what people make of it, because even today people have issues with it.
Well, think about it on a cosmological level, okay? Everything around us affects us, okay? Whether we like to think it does or not, everything around us affects us. The energy of the people around us, the energy of the world around us. You know, when you walk into a house and you just get a real bad feeling and you don't know why, and they're really friendly people, but you just know you need to leave. That's what I'm talking about. Is everything affects us around us. So having a comet come by, that is not a usual thing, because the moon up in the sky affects us, but that's there every single day and we've learned to adjust to it. But having a comet come by, that's a foreign object that now is affecting us on an energy scale where we need to adjust our lives again. So that's why a lot of people see it as, this is a hardship, this is a harbinger of something. They don't necessarily see it as a time for them to step up and maybe make some new decisions in their life. So the fact that this is coming around this time of year is actually showing me that there are a lot of new beginnings that all of us need to make.
It'll be
Because this is
interesting.
going to affect everyone.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I said earlier that generally March is our snowiest month here in Colorado. It'll be interesting to see because I don't believe that's going to happen this year. Based on we're having problems hearing you with your microphone. I'm not sure what's going on with it, but one of the things that has happened is that we've been in several years of El Nino, and now we're in a La Nina weather pattern. And one of the things that has been observed is that when we have La Nina, we get very little snow at the beginning of winter and very little snow at the end of winter and dumped on in the center. And that's exactly what's happened this year. So at this point, we might get another snowstorm or two. I don't expect much out of them, but I don't think that, where normally, those of us who've been in Colorado forever expect a massive, to get buried in snow, either March, April, sometimes May. I don't think that's going to happen this year, and it'll be interesting to see if any of that gets attributed by various people to this comet that's going to appear. It'll really depend on how bright it is. How well can it be seen?
Mm.
So yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting experiment, social experiment, to see what's going on with that. So we've been talking about what Imbolc is, and we talked about the fact that it's the beginning of spring. So end of winter, beginning of spring. At least here in Colorado, it certainly seems to have happened that way. We're getting up into the mid to high 50s and 60s. I guess by Friday it's supposed to be almost 70. And I fully expect that there will be some cool downs, where it will drop into the 30s and 40s. But for the most part, I think winter itself, as far as we're concerned, is probably going to be over. I'm hopeful. I'm crossing my fingers.
Mhm.
But the thing of it is that we've been talking about what Imbolc is, and where it comes from. Um, what how does Imbolc impact us today? I think that's the biggest question, because one of the things I've noticed about especially people who are new to witchcraft, they most people who are new come to it through books. They'll see TV or movies, and it'll spark an interest, but they'll learn more about it and what it means to be a witch, how to be a witch, through books. And most of that is, it talks about the old days, centuries ago. Here's what our ancestors used to do. This is what they do. So Imbolc was the time to prepare, to repair to repair and prepare for planting season. Okay, we most people today don't plant because we've got we've got other things. Most Americans, and I would say most of the Western world, lives in cities, so we don't do a lot of planting. What kind of effect does Imbolc have in store for us as modern people?
2 words: spring cleaning.
Okay.
I'm not even kidding. That's actually part of my Imbolc ritual. Is at the beginning of February, I start cleaning everything. I pull the refrigerator out, I pull the stove out, I clean behind those. I make sure that everything is washed and clean. I go from top to bottom of my house, and then I usually start inviting people over for dinner. On either the same night or different nights, depending on how big of a celebration I want to have. And that's part of me having a new beginning, is showing my friends that I'm welcoming them into my home, and we're going to have fun in this place, and it's going to be a good place with good energy. But I want it to be clean for everyone. So part of my ritual is cleaning the entire house.
Okay.
And a lot of people do that in the springtime. They'll start doing things like beating out rugs and sweeping out their garage from all the dirt and grit that got in there, and you know pulling out the lighter blankets and putting away the heavier blankets, things
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah, I usually wait for Ostar to do that, but I see your point. What about, like I said, this traditionally or historically has been a time to repair and prepare for planting, and a lot of times you'll find various pagans, witches especially, who will use that sympathetically, symbolically, as a way of doing magic. And so, what about preparing and thinking about those seeds that you want to plant that you would like to harvest later in the fall?
Hmm. You can do that in all kinds of different things. You can do that with your job. You can think of ways that you can improve in your job, improve your performance. Maybe get a better job. Start thinking about moving in a new direction in your job. You can do that at home by revamping the family a little bit. Have a family meeting with everybody and say, okay, so here's the things that we've tried over the last year, and here are the things that worked, and here are the things that didn't, and how are we going to move forward with this. You can do it personally. You can look at yourself and interview yourself. What are some of the things that I did right in the last years? What are some of the things I could have improved upon? And how do I want to move forward with that? And plant those seeds of renewal in yourself, plant those seeds of renewal in your job, plant those seeds of renewal in your family, and start fresh.
And you said something that I really like, and that is look back at where you are and where you've been and what you did in the last year, and use that to help you figure out what you want to change. What do you want to happen this year? And understand that bigger things are going to take longer amounts of time. But what you have to be, I think you have to be realistic if you're looking at manifesting something over the next 6 or 8 months. It has to be something you can manifest over the next 6 or 8 months. Magic is not a shortcut or miracle, thing. It takes work. You have to actually work at magic in order for it to work. Excuse me, but I think I'm catching a cold. But by looking back at what happened last year, you have the ability to see, especially if you had plans last year that didn't come about, that weren't manifest for whatever reason. Now you can look back and say, well, why was it that this didn't happen? I know for a fact that one of the things that I wanted to try and get done last year was I wanted to get some classes out on Witchcraft Academy and start getting that whole process going. Well, I know why that didn't happen last year. A lot of it was because I was working a lot of overtime, and and when I wasn't, I spent a lot more time doing other things than working on the classes. This year, I fully plan and expect to have at least one, if not two, classes out by fall. That's the goal. All right, what does it take for me to do that? Well, I can do a little bit of magic. The magic helps me, keeps it in my back of my mind. This is what I want. This is what I have said I want to manifest. So as I'm going through and doing my, whatever it is during the day and at night, I have this thought in the back of my head constantly reminding me, hey, you said you wanted to do this. But it also requires the work. It requires that I actually create the classes. It requires that I actually write down what it is I want to do, shoot the videos, edit the videos, put everything together, create the course, put it up online. It requires that I do all this work. It's not a matter of it's done. That's not magic. That's not the way magic works. And so by understanding where I'm at, which is I'm nearly ready to have. I've got one. I think I've got one thing I got to shoot for video on. Excuse me. And I'll have the first class ready, and then I've got an outline of what I want to do for the second class. I actually have to I'm close to getting the first class out and out there for people who want it, and so I just have to buck up and do it. Over the spring and summer, I can then, once I do that, I can start working on the next class, which I already have the idea for. I know what I want to do. I have a pretty good idea of how I want to do it. I've got an outline written up, at least the beginnings of it. Now I start filling that out with the actual material over the spring and summer so that I can have it ready to go and ready to put out there for people by fall. I know that these are the steps, and the magic comes in every time I want to do something else. Well, it's a nice day out. It's nice and warm. I'd like to just relax and catch some rays. Oh, wait, I have to do this because I said I wanted to have this ready. And if I have it ready sooner, that's fine. Now I can relax. If it's done, I can go out and do the fun stuff, but I got to do the work first. And so I look at this as far as getting things ready and creating that magic on the things I want to manifest. I want to manifest these two classes, class and a course, and I want to get them and have them out there for people to take advantage of by, Samhain. It's always good to set a deadline. Samhain's a good time. All right, this is something that I can. This is something I can do. I know what's involved, what it requires. And if I don't get it done, I have no one to blame but myself. I'm the only one who is either going to do it or not do it.
And there's actually another little ritual that I really enjoy that I think you could incorporate that as a part of it. Um, there's something called a priapic wand, and basically what it is it's a small twig that you get out of your yard that you can either tie or glue some acorns to, and then you wrap it with ribbons and you leave a little bit of the ribbons hanging on the end and you attach bells to them. And you walk around with this ribbon outside and you can shake it and talk to the sprites and the dwarves and the trees and the grass, and you can tell everything. Okay, it's time to wake up. It's time to wake up now, and you can ask for favors in return. So if you're waking everything up in your garden, you can maybe ask your garden gnomes, or dwarves or whatever you prefer to call them. You can ask them, okay, I need you to help me remember that I need to get these two classes done. So whenever I look at this area, I want you to, send me those vibes that I need to get these classes done. And trees, I need you guys to wake up. I need you to help me too, and just shake your wand at them and help wake them up, and then ask them, okay, I've woken you up. Now I need a favor. If you could help me to remember to do these classes,
Hmm.
that's you could incorporate that into that. I usually ask for things like, um, can you please be a good nesting spot for birds? Can you please provide shade to the deer? Things like that. That's what I ask for. But if you need help in other areas, such as reminders to remember to do things, you can ask them for that favor as well.
It's interesting. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Because as the Norse would say, the land wights, whether it's the Celts call it the Fae, the sprites, whatever. The spirits of the land, the spirits that surround us. Absolutely, you can certainly ask for favors. Now, if you're looking at it from the Celtic, and I'm not so sure about the Norse, I would have to talk to some people I know, but certainly the Celtic, those who follow the Celtic path, they tend to be a little more cautious about asking for favors from the Fae, because there's always a price to pay, and you may or may not
Yes.
be interested in paying that price.
Hmm.
But the idea of looking inward. We talk about uh, paying attention to the world around you and noticing the changes, and I think that's extremely important. But just as important, because we're still in the dark time of the year, we're starting to come into the light time of the year. The dark time of the year has always been that time of the year that's used for reflection, inner reflection, looking inward and seeing, doing the work to make yourself a better you. And if you've spent the last several months from Samhain through now in determining, doing that that shadow work. I think you call it shadow work. Doing that shadow work and working on yourself. Now you can turn outward again as the light returns, and you can take those lessons that you learned from the inner work, and they are now reflected outward, and hopefully it will help you to manifest. You'll first of all, you'll have a much better idea of what it is you want to manifest. And typically this is going to be something you want to manifest for yourself. This is something you want to do for yourself. In my case, it's for myself and for others, but usually it's for yourself, because if you don't do it, who's going to?
Hmm.
And so you take you take that time and that those lessons learned, and you can now use use that knowledge, and it gives you the opportunity to now take it from the inside, where it was, it's theory, and bring it to the outside, where you can now make it into practice, whatever that happens to be. Because you have spent this time inwardly reflecting on yourself and who you are and what you want, and all those hard questions that everybody asks throughout their life, and never takes any time to really answer, to look at and answer. Because you've taken these months of I don't want to say isolation, but people, my manager and I talk about, we go into our cave in this, and we hibernate in our caves in the winter, because that's kind of what it is right now. I still go out and do stuff, but most of my nights are spent here at home doing something, and a lot of times it's that inner reflection. Now that we can go outside and we can turn this inner reflection outward, and start working on these things that we know we want, whatever it is. If you know what it is you want, that's the first step. And the second step is, okay, what is it going to take to get you from where you're at now to where you want to be? You want something, okay, you know what you want. Now, how do you get it? What are the steps involved? It's as simple as that. And once you figured out what steps are involved, now you can spend the spring and the summer actively what's the word? Tending
towards that goal.
Tending. I was trying to use a gardening metaphor. Tending to it, because plants don't grow on their own. I mean, yes, they do, but if you really want them to bloom and to prosper, you have to tend to them. You have to weed them. You have to feed them. You have to water them. Well, you're doing the same metaphorical things to whatever it is you're trying to manifest by the fall. You're feeding it. You are tending it. You are weeding it. You are watering it. You're fertilizing it. You're doing the things that you need to do in order to get it to the point where it manifests come fall.
Now, I wanna jump back just for a second, because you mentioned that there's always a price to pay with the Fae, and,
Sure.
and admittedly that's true, but it's not necessarily always dangerous to ask them for things. There is.
I think the word I used was cautious.
Yeah, there's often a correlation from what you ask for what they want in return. And usually, if you take care of them, they will also in turn take care of you. So if you leave things out for your Fae, for instance, a specific type of herb or flower that you know that your type of Fae like, or even like bits of grains or I mean anything.
Cream.
Just yes, anything that's particular to them they like. They usually take that as the payment for whatever favor that you're asking. As long as it's not something too overboard.
Sure.
For instance, one of the things that I do is I spread lavender around the house. I make sure that I completely encircle the house, though, because apparently the fairies don't like it when you only put it in one spot. And they get a little pissy about that. So I completely encircle the house with a little bit of lavender flowers. And like I said earlier, I ask for things like
help. The glass broke.
All right, so I'll go ahead. Yeah, I'll go ahead and take over for you. That's not go take care of it. So, yeah, I do my show from my house. I do the show from my house. She does the show from her house. I'm going to go ahead and real quickly. There we go. That'll take care of that. Just in case there are noises, I can hear them, but you can't. So yes, I understand exactly what she was saying as far as when you work with spirits, when you work with the spirits of the land, of the elements, whether it be the Fae or the land wights or whatever you call them, you have to understand what it is they desire, what it is they want, because you're going to have to pay them. You're going to give payment in kind. That's one of the reasons why I tend to not work with them so much for this sort of thing. And you'll find, as Rick probably realized by now, she and I have different ideas on how this is done, and that's perfectly fine. Which way is right? Well, the right way is the way that works best for you. And that is something that it can be difficult to figure out when you're just starting out. I actually had a friend of mine, I just met her, and she came to me at one point and she says, I got a question. I said, okay, what's the question? She says, I'm reading these 5 books. And I said, all at once? And she said, yeah, that's the way I read. Okay, fine. She says, but they're all talking about how to consecrate your tools, and each one has a different way of doing it. I've got 5 different ways to consecrate my tools. I said, okay. She says, which one's right? Well, they all are. Which one works best for you? Well, I don't know. I haven't tried any. Precisely. You haven't tried any. In order to figure out what will work best for you, you have to try a few things, and you're gonna fail. It is an absolute given that you are not going to succeed at 100% of everything you try. You're gonna fail. Accept that now. Once you accept that you're gonna fail, and realize that failing is not a bad thing, it's simply a lesson. You've learned what not to do. Now you pick yourself up and you try something different. See if that works. Eventually, you will figure out what it takes, what works for you, what works best for you. First you'll find something that works for you. You'll continue to experiment, and you'll find out things that work better. Hopefully, if it works better, you continue to use it. So you continue to do it, and it's as simple as that. But when you're first starting out, it can be really difficult because you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. I'm simply trying to give you some ideas that you can use to go with and try out. And if you fail, okay, no big deal. You fail. Do it again. Try something different. There's no harm. There's no what's the word I'm looking for? There's no bad, nothing bad about failing. Failure is simply a lesson you need, that you learned. Once you've learned enough lessons, you realize you start to succeed. And so when we're talking about these holidays, these Sabbats, whether it be Imbolc or one of the other 7, a lot of what it is recognizing that we're turning the wheel of the year. We call it the wheel of the year because it's never ending. It has no beginning and is never ending. And when you've gone around enough times, they talk about wisdom. The wisdom of those who are older. The elders who the wise elders. Well, the only reason they're wise is because they've spent enough time failing that they know they learned what doesn't work. Wisdom is simply learning what doesn't work and not doing it. And so part of the reason we celebrate these Sabbats, these holidays, is to recognize we've gone around again. It's another year that we're celebrating this holiday, this Sabbat, whatever it is, and hopefully we have learned something from that trip around the sun. Sometime in the last year, we have learned something that we didn't know at this time last year, and hopefully that means we can apply it in our life to make our life better this year. That's honestly what this is all about. And now that we are looking at the return of the sun, the longer days, the warmer days, easier times in that things are going to bloom. The plants that create the food that we eat tend to be easier to come by when it gets warmer. So most deaths happen in the winter. It's a proven fact. Winter is when most people die. Well, there are a lot of reasons for it, but it's always been the hard time of the year. The summer tends to be an easier time, less effort to get things. You can go outside, and if you have a garden, you can go outside and pick something to eat. So we are looking at this and saying, okay, we're getting better. We're getting closer to this time of feast, this time of excess, and hopefully we've learned some lessons from our last trip around the sun, and we're applying them to our lives, and we can now continue and go on and make our life better than it was last year. And really, that I think is the object of the purpose of following this path, is to find these lessons, learn these lessons and make your life better than it was. If you can do that, I think you've won. I think that you've won this game called life. So we're coming up at the end of the hour, and I do want to real quickly add that if you haven't gone there before, you can find a lot of this stuff on witchcraftacademy.com. I will be putting up classes there as soon as they're ready. And I just want to make sure that you are aware of it. We didn't get any other talkers on our voice chat tonight, and that's fine. We got a couple of people to talk in our text chat, and I see some people watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of the show. Thank you for adding to the show. And we will see you again next month. And I believe our topic next month it's March. If it's March, it must be Ostara. So we'll be talking about Ostara next month. Until then, have a great night, a wonderful month, and blessed be. And I got to also make sure I set this all. All right. So, blessed be.